The story begins deep inside a dangerous dungeon where three powerful adventurers have just finished an intense battle. Working together, they managed to defeat hundreds of demons and even forced the Demon King to retreat. One of the warriors, named Gorin, is extremely proud of what they accomplished. Even though they failed to kill the Demon King, he believes they dealt enough damage to leave him badly wounded. The blonde hero, named Eric, agrees with him. He says the injuries they inflicted should be enough to keep the Demon King from attacking again for quite some time. The third member of the group, a mage named Luck, seems far less interested in celebrating their victory. Instead, he keeps staring at one of the Demon King's severed arms that was cut off during the battle. Gorin and Eric tell Luck to stop worrying about the arm and simply enjoy the fact that they survived. They jokingly tease him by saying that being such a nerd about strange things like this is probably the reason he still has not found a girlfriend. Changing the subject, Eric says they should hurry back home because the battle caused him to miss the birth of his child. Luck hears that and says moments like that are exactly why he has chosen to stay single. But Eric and Gorin immediately disagree with him. They explain that having a family should never be seen as a burden. To them, it is one of the greatest blessings a person can have. Before the conversation can continue, a large group of demons suddenly appears and surrounds the three adventurers from every direction. Luck quickly studies the situation. He immediately realizes that after everything they have already been through, there is no chance they can win another direct battle in their exhausted condition. Without wasting a second, Luck creates 3 magic circles at the same time. He then tells Gorin and Eric to leave everything to him and escape while they still can. Eric and Gorin immediately shout back at him. They tell him to stop saying such ridiculous things because there is no way they are going to abandon him. Luck does not argue with them. Instead, he silently casts an earth barrier. A massive wall of earth suddenly rises between them, trapping Eric and Gorin outside the battlefield while leaving Luck alone to face the demons. Eric and Gorin desperately pound on the barrier and yell at Luck to stop this madness. However, Luck refuses to listen. He calmly reminds them that they both have families waiting for them back home. That is exactly why they have to survive, even if it means leaving him behind. As the demons surge toward him, Luck unleashes an energy spell that tears through the first wave and drops them where they stand. Standing over the bodies, he recognizes the uncomfortable truth that he's already pushing the edge of what he has left, and the demons show absolutely no sign of stopping. Things take a sharp turn for the worse when the demon general suddenly materializes, grabs him by the throat, and begins draining his life force directly. When she tosses him aside and walks toward him slowly, clearly expecting to finish things, Luck turns her own technique against her, using the same mana-absorbing skill right back on her and exercising her on the spot. That kind of instant adaptation is only possible because of a unique learning ability Luck carries that allows him to absorb and replicate any spell used against him. What follows is several months of grinding through that same dungeon, cutting down demons without end. Whenever exhaustion caught up with him, Luck would cast a spell called Marionette, a technique that keeps his body fighting on its own even while he sleeps, letting him recover without ever fully stopping. After months of this cycle, Luck begins to wonder whether he's finally cleared the place out. Then the Demon King suddenly comes back, hurling a massive fireball straight at him. Luck throws up a barrier and absorbs the hit, genuinely stunned that the Demon King has recovered this quickly given the beating he took the last time around. He charges in and attempts his Drain Touch, but the Demon King counters with an invisible barrier that absorbs the skill entirely. From there, Luck finds himself being steadily overwhelmed, and the situation reaches a low point when the Demon King's hexblade shatters his sword completely. Left without a weapon, Luck abandons close combat and shifts entirely to sorcery, firing off his imprisoning Hellfire and Drain Touch simultaneously. Both attacks connect at the same time, putting the Demon King in an impossible position. He can either burn alive in the Hellfire or have his life force consumed by the Drain Touch. He has no good answer for either. A blinding explosion follows, and when the light finally fades, Luck crawls up from the ground and takes stock of the situation. The Demon King is finished. He lets out a quiet celebration, takes the Hexblade as his prize, and heads for the surface. Once he gets there, he quickly realizes he has no idea where he actually is. On top of that, his adventure card was incinerated somewhere during the fighting, leaving him completely broke and without any form of identification to his name. After that, he heads to the royal capital. The moment moment he arrives, the guards stop him and call him out for walking around naked, and they end up giving him some new clothes to wear. His first thought is to go straight to Goran's house. When he gets there, he's shocked at how massive the mansion is. He asks right away to see Goran, but the butler turns him down, assuming Luck is just another fan trying to meet him. After that, Luck decides to head to the Adventurers Guild to get his guild card reissued. On the way, he notices a stone statue standing in the middle of town that wasn't there before. He asks a passerby about it, and the man is stunned that Luck doesn't recognize who it is. He explains that the statue is of Saint Luck, the famous hero who fought in the dungeon to hold back the demons for an entire decade. Luck suddenly realizes the statue is of him, and that everyone must have assumed he died in the dungeon, which is why they built it in his honor. He is also surprised to learn that he spent 10 years fighting there without even realizing it. After that, he finally makes his way to the Adventurers Guild, where Goran recognizes him instantly. Goran pulls him into the back room and embraces him, crying tears of joy and telling him how glad he is that he came back alive. Luck then starts stuffing his face with cakes, since it's been so long since he's had real food. Eventually, Goran takes the cakes away from him, insisting he needs to eat rice gruel instead to keep a balanced diet. Eric then arrives in style, carrying the rice gruel himself, and tells Luck how happy he is to see him again. Luck simply tells him to calm down, saying the sight of a grown man crying doesn't sit well with him. Setting that aside, Eric points out that both he and Goran have visibly aged, while Luck, strangely, looks younger than before. Luck glances at his reflection and realizes it's true. He really has gotten younger. He guesses it must be the result of absorbing the Demon King's life force after defeating him. Goran and Eric are left completely speechless the moment they learn that Luck actually defeated the Demon King. Eric explains that the kingdom has been busy preparing its military in case the Demon King ever returned. But since Luck has already beaten him, it's now clear that he deserves some kind of reward. What catches Luck most off guard is the moment Goran refers to him as Your Majesty. Goran explains that Eric became king after the previous king decided he deserved the throne, since Eric was a noble who took part in driving away the Demon King. Having taken part in that same effort himself, Goran ended up being named Grandmaster of the Adventurers Guild. Along with that, Luck also learns that Eric had given him a noble title for the part he played in driving away the Demon King. That's why the statue had been built, since everyone assumed he died in the line of duty. Hearing this makes Luck wonder if being alive now might actually cause problems. Since the whole kingdom believes he's dead, Goran and Eric both see his point, so Luck decides to let the world go on thinking Saint Luck is dead, while he starts over from scratch as an ordinary adventurer. Goran wonders if that might be far too dull for someone of his level, given that he's an S-rank sorcerer, but Luck tells him it'll be fine, since he's always liked a good adventure. It doesn't take long for Goran to get him a new adventurer's card, this time under the name Luck instead of Luck. His true stats are also hidden on the card, so to anyone looking, he'll appear to be nothing more than an ordinary F-rank adventurer. The next day, as Luck heads out toward the guild, a blonde girl spots him from a distance and watches him with quiet curiosity, wondering just who he is. Luck arrives at the guild shortly after and is introduced to the receptionist, Aron. He tells her he'd like to take on a goblin extermination quest, but she advises against it, assuming he's just an inexperienced rookie who's likely to get himself killed. That's when a group of adventurers calls out to him, suggesting they team up for the quest together. Aron likes the sound of that and quickly stamps her approval. Outside, the two adventurers introduce themselves as Ario and Ginny. Ario is a mage, while Ginny is an archer. Luck introduces himself simply as a warrior, and with that settled, the three of them set off toward the goblin hideout. Along the way, Luck notices that Ginny is a genuinely skilled scout. She sticks close to the trail and reads it with sharp instinct, quick to catch details others might miss. Because of that, she doesn't strike him as someone who truly belongs at F rank. Even so, Ginny seems to have underestimated just how many goblins they're dealing with, since neither of them notices a set of camouflaged footprints. Goblins aren't clever enough to hide their own tracks, which means something else, something smarter, is likely leading them. Locke briefly considers warning the other two, but decides against it. Since he's essentially training them, he wants them to learn through their own mistakes and grow from the experience. They eventually reach the entrance to the Goblin Cave, and after scouting the area for a while, Locke offers to take the lead while while Ario and Ginny provide covering fire from behind. Working together, the group manages to take down more than 30 goblins, though the strain is clearly starting to wear on Ario and Ginny, both running low on mana and arrows. Noticing this, Ario suggests they pull back and retreat, and Locke agrees it's the right call. But just then, a deep roar echoes through the cave. The Goblin Lord has awakened. Locke finds the whole situation strange, since the goblins have been showing an unusual level of coordination all along, almost as if someone has been directing them from the shadows. Just as the Goblin Lord gets ready to attack, a beast girl suddenly appears out of nowhere, throwing herself into the fight and warning the Goblin Lord to stay out of her way. Angered by her taunt, the Goblin Lord swings his heavy club at the beast girl. She dodges the attack with a nimble grace, then strikes his shoulder with her blade. However, the monster's armored flesh is too thick for her to cut through. Realizing she's in for a tough fight, she tells Locke's party to escape while they still have the chance. Locke tells Ario and Ginny to leave first, so they nod. They wonder if he'll be okay on his own, but he seems more concerned for them. Locke warns the two to watch out for surprise attacks on the way out. As they leave, Locke praises Ario for leaving instead of sticking around for the sake of friendship. If he had done so, he would only have been a dead weight in a fight above his pay grade. Meanwhile, as the beast girl struggles against the Goblin Lord, Locke casually asks her if she needs help. Feeling angry that he ignored her warning to run, the girl tells him to do whatever he wants. However, she warns him to stay away from the fight since she doesn't trust his abilities. Locke observes her fight, seeming bored by the dull action. He tells the girl that she's losing to the goblin, which hurts her pride. She wonders if Locke thinks she's weaker than the monster, but he explains that he was actually referring to her sword. As if on cue, the beast girl's sword suddenly shatters from the Goblin Lord's relentless onslaught. With the girl seemingly unarmed, Locke asks if she'll consider his help now. However, she still refuses and tells him to get out of the cave. She pulls out another sword from its scabbard and charges the Goblin Lord, ready to defeat him with a fresh weapon. Suddenly, her momentum is instantly crushed as the Goblin Lord actually knocks the sword out of her hand. This time, Locke decides to stop playing, and he directly jumps into the fight. The girl watches, shocked, as he confidently claims that he'll destroy the monster by himself. The Goblin Lord roars at Locke to stun him, causing the girl to cover her eyes. However, Locke remains completely unaffected, and he divides the goblin into 4 pieces with just one attack. Seeing the strange man defeat such a powerful monster like it was nothing, the beast girl suddenly catches feelings for Locke, her warrior instincts stirred by his manliness. However, when he asks her if she's okay, she feels somewhat afraid of him. She then introduces herself as Ja, daughter of the chief of the Eastern Beast tribe. She sincerely thanks him for saving her life before asking about his identity. Locke suddenly claims he's an F rank, so she obviously doesn't believe him. Then, he proudly shows her his F rank card. Seeing this, Ja has no choice but to accept the reality. However, she wonders why he's so happy about being at the very bottom. He ignores her concerns and asks about her adventurer rank. Ja reveals that she's a B rank and apologizes for asking him to leave earlier. At the time, she had no idea that she was speaking to someone miles stronger than her, understanding that she was simply concerned for someone who looked weak. Locke reassures her that he doesn't mind. He then asks her what kind of monster dwells in the very bottom of the dungeon. Hearing this, Ja becomes speechless, since the dungeon boss was supposed to be a secret. Although Ja tries to hide it at first, Locke easily sees through her lies. Seeing that she doesn't want to expose her secret, he turns around and starts heading deeper into the cave. Ja wonders what he's doing, so he tells her that he plans to defeat the final boss on his own. Although Locke was only hired for a small quest to exterminate goblins, he feels worried that the dungeon's final boss will harm the people living in the surrounding area. Hearing his words, Ja suddenly tells him that the final boss is no laughing matter. For some reason, she completely forgets that its identity was supposed to be a secret. She reveals that the final boss is a vicious vampire lord, leagues above the Goblin Lord. Locke admits that vampires are a much more troublesome foe. However, he remembers that she was trying to clear out the dungeon, so he wonders if she was seriously considering fighting the vampire on her own. He reminds Ja that a vampire is a powerful creature, so there's no way that someone like her can defeat one on her own. Ja knows he's right, but she claims that it's her duty to defeat the vampire. Locke nods and starts starts walking again, which leaves her disappointed, wanting to share her story. She starts speaking, even though he didn't ask her. A while back, Zha's tribe was fighting an entire clan of vampires. Although they had defeated most of them, one of them survived and heavily injured her father. Then, it fled the scene and vanished into this cave. In the Beastman tribe, letting an enemy escape is considered a great disgrace. Hence, she wants to avenge her injured father by defeating the vampire herself. Locke asks her if her honor will still be restored if she takes his help. Zha explains that it will be, even if she receives assistance. So, he hands her his sword to replace the one that was broken. Zha feels confused, since this would leave him empty-handed, but Locke claims that he fights better barehanded. At first, she thinks he's only being polite for her sake, but then he proceeds to destroy a bunch of goblins like they're made out of paper. Zha is stunned by Locke's incredible strength, unaware that he developed incredible strength and martial arts skill after being forced to survive against the Demon Lord's army for an entire decade. With Locke's help, they soon reach the dungeon's final room. There, the vampire lord laughs sinisterly as it senses Zha's presence. He reminds the naive girl that even her powerful father was unable to scratch him, so she has no hope of laying a single hand on his body. Zha gets enraged by his words, and the vampire lord prepares to take her down. After seeing him up close, Locke realizes that the vampire deliberately manipulated the nearby goblins to appear weak so he could lure adventurers inside and drain their life force. The vampire is impressed by his deduction skills, but he doesn't think much of Locke's strength. He points out that although vampire magic does not work on Beastmen, he can actually control a human's mind with his spells. Hearing this, Zha realizes she messed up by dragging Locke into her mess. Although Zha tries to warn him, Locke starts moving towards the vampire lord in a trance. As Zha blames herself for endangering his life, the vampire starts gloating, thinking he has already won. He taunts Zha to choose whether she wants to die by her friend's hand or his own. The vampire continues to bluster, but suddenly, Locke punches him smack in the face. After getting humbled, the vampire wonders why his special technique didn't work. Locke simply explains that he has a high resistance to mental debuffs, but his explanation doesn't satisfy him. The vampire claims there's no way a human could resist a vampire lord's attack. Hearing this, Locke exposes the so-called vampire lord for actually being a lesser vampire pretending to be great. This causes the vampire to grow enraged, and he furiously charges at Locke, only to get punted back into a wall. Locke continues to mock the vampire, calling him a lesser version, so the vampire tries to avenge his good name. Although he attacks with tendrils of darkness, Locke easily avoids them and uses a high magic circle to drastically speed up his body. In the blink of an eye, he appears right in front of the vampire and uses his drain touch to suck all of his energy. After getting defeated, the vampire lord wonders who Locke truly is. In response, the happy adventurer claims that he's just a random F-rank adventurer. Suddenly, the vampire claims that Locke has unleashed a powerful curse on himself by defeating him. Although he doesn't believe the vampire's words, Zha rushes in and cleaves its body in half with Locke's blade. The vampire is shocked to realize that he can't regenerate his body after the sword's slash. In his last moments, he warns Zha that she has done something irreversible to his metal. Zha returns Locke's sword, saying that it released a strange power when she cut through the vampire. He claims that she was just imagining it, since he can't just reveal it's the fallen demon lord's sword. Then, Zha digs through the ground and finds a cursed medallion dropped by the vampire. She explains that every person the vampire kills or absorbs releases an energy of resentment, which nourishes a curse power in the metal. Locke wonders why no vampires had these medallions 10 years ago. Suddenly, the vampire laughs with his remaining strength. Since his metal is exposed to the world, he claims that it will open a portal to the dark dimension. Hearing this, Locke finally gets serious. The vampire brags that his supposed dark gods will destroy the earth by entering from the portal, so Locke recalls that the dimensional rift is the same place where he was stuck fighting for 10 years. At the time, the humans had not discovered any way to enter the portal from their world. When the demon lord attacked from his portal, Locke and his friends jumped in. However, the portal closed off later in their world. Because of this, Eric and Goran could not return to rescue him after escaping the dimension. Suddenly, Locke slashes the coin in two and absorbs the curse power inside. The vampire is shocked, unable to believe that someone could absorb such a potent curse power without any side effects. Locke tells the vampire that even if the portal had opened, there would have been no demons coming out of it. The reason behind it is obviously himself, since he has already exterminated all of the demons inside. After hearing this, the vampire finally realizes that Locke used the demon lord's sword to absorb the curse, and he makes the connection. He wonders if Locke is the legendary great sage Luck. However, Locke shuts his mouth before he can say too much. Unfortunately, Ja has already heard him, so the cat is out of the bag. Locke apologizes for breaking the metal. Ja doesn't mind it, so both of them start heading out of the dungeon. She wonders if Ario and Ginny are doing okay, but Locke is confident in their abilities. Suddenly, Ja stops as she realizes that she addressed him by his first name. He stops, stunned by her words. She then asks if he really is the legendary sage, so Locke asks her to keep it a secret. She smiles, feeling excited to carry the secret of such a great personality. Later, they hand over the monster drops to the Adventurers Guild. The receptionist is surprised by the gigantic pile of materials, so Locke and his party explain that the dungeon just had more goblins than usual. Hearing this, the receptionist apologizes on the guild's behalf for misjudging the mission's difficulty. Later, Ja thanks Locke again for all his help. He smiles, asking if she can share her tribe's intel on vampires in return. Although he was able to defeat the vampire lord today, he feels worried that other vampires could use unknown methods to plunge the world into the dimensional rift's chaos again. Ja smiles, asking if he can speak directly to Goran. Locke nods, so she tells him to alert Goran to be on the lookout for vampires. She then offers him half of her medallion. When Locke asks why, she explains that it will serve as proof to convince Goran to keep an eye on the vampires. Locke accepts the medallion, and Ja leaves. He then takes it to Goran, who seems extremely worried after Locke disappeared for 3 whole days. While the two of them chat, someone quietly sneaks up to the room to eavesdrop on their conversation. After reminding Goran that he's not his mother, Locke explains that the demon lord was actually just a pawn used by the so-called dark gods. Goran wonders what material the medallion is made of. Despite his skills as a sorcerer, Locke is also unable to identify the material. He suggests showing it to an alchemist, and Goran agrees to consider it. As Locke turns to leave, Goran sincerely thanks him for protecting the rookie adventurers, Ario and Ginny. Locke accepts his thanks and heads out, but soon bumps into a girl. He wonders who it is, so Goran starts introducing her as his daughter, Chelis. However, she leaves before he can say anything else. Locke wonders if Chelis hates him, but Goran explains that she actually hates her own father. Since her childhood, Chelis has wanted to become an adventurer. Although she got a B rank ability, Goran refused to let her become one, worried that she would get hurt because of her inexperience. Locke reminds him that one can only get experience in the real world, but Goran refuses to let his daughter outside before consulting his wife, who is currently visiting a foreign nation. Then, he asks Locke for a favor. Goran explains that once his daughter turns 15, she will be considered an adult and allowed to become an adventurer on her own. Because of this, he hopes that Locke can keep an eye on her when she eventually escapes. The next day, Locke watches Chelis train with her sword, feeling annoyed that he has to babysit her from now on. However, Chelis gets even more annoyed as she catches him looking. Later, while Locke is having lunch at Goran's mansion, Chelis enters the room and sits across from him. Under her intense glare, Locke feels awkward and expects some kind of insult or rejection. Instead, she suddenly accuses him of being her father's illegitimate son, causing him to break his teacup in shock. That was the second episode. Subscribe to not miss the next part and watch the next video on screen.